It's a week before the trade deadline, and things just keep getting worse for your Seattle Mariners. We'll talk about that disaster of a loss last night, how the Mariners might react to JP Crawford's injury, and explore the idea of trading Andres Munoz coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. This is Tiding Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we're going to work through our feelings, if you will, following the Mariners, let's say, hitting their newest low point of the season last night. Might not be the lowest point of the season, but it's the new low point of the season.
I mean, they do play in 6 hours, so
that's very true. We'll talk about avenues the Mariners could go down in response to JP Crawford's injury, and explore the possibility of trading Andres Munoz at the deadline, because that's kind of the point where we're at right now. I mean, last night was terrible, and Colby started texting me Andres Munoz trade, so we're going to go over those a little later on in this show.
Like how you're trying to make this a thing like I'm panicking and I'm like
it's
the
you.
cell. That's literally not what the exercise is about, but okay, sure.
It's exactly what it's about. It's exactly what it's about.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Colby's given up. Colby's scared to compete.
Noted. Don't go all in when you're in first place on July 23rd.
Right.
Guys, that's me.
Hey man, I wasn't the one texting, the other Andres Munoz trades last night. I'm just saying.
I don't know. I figured we didn't want to talk about this game for 3 segments. You're welcome.
Fair point. Before we talk about this game and the Andres Munoz trades and all that, shout out to our title sponsor today, FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. The link is in the description. You can sign up for a free 7-day trial. All right, so before we get into the meat and potatoes of our show today, real quick, Ty France has cleared waivers. No word as of yet if he has accepted his assignment to Tacoma or not. But he did clear out his locker last night, said goodbye to his teammates, which kind of plays into everything that happened last night. Real quick, though, I would think, because the Mariners have to make a couple moves today on the 26-man roster. One for the open spot that France has left, and then JP Crawford's going to go on the IL with his fractured pinky. So I would assume that's going to be Tyler Locklear and then Leo Rivas, maybe Ryan Bliss, who they can call back up because it would be for an injury. Or maybe it's something different. Maybe they have something different up their sleeve. Maybe it's Luis Arias, who would have to be added back to the 40-man roster, but he's been hitting pretty well down in Tacoma, so maybe they do something like that. We'll see. But yeah, so, France said goodbye to his teammates last night. JP breaks his hand, and they had yet another disastrous loss, their 4th consecutive loss to the Angels, who are terrible. But the Mariners continue to let them hang around late in games, and they blew yet another lead to this Angels team. Now, it was just a 1-0 lead, right? You should absolutely score more runs against this team, even with Tyler Anderson on the mound. The Mariners didn't do that. Now, yes, they played most of this game without JP Crawford. They played the entire game without Julio Rodriguez. But still, they scored in the first inning. They did nothing from that point forward. Bryce Miller was fantastic. Cannot praise him enough for what he did last night. But like the rest of this rotation, he was left out to dry by his offense, and then the bullpen wasn't able to get the job done with such a small lead. Ryan Stanek, another rough outing for him. And then Trent Thornton kind of fell apart there in the 9th inning with a chance to get out of it unscathed. Had no one on base, had gotten the first 2 outs, and then walks the next 2 guys, and then gives up a 2-run single to Joe Adell, who just continues to haunt the Mariners. And after this game, Scott Service spoke to the media, and I don't think I've ever and I might be wrong about this, but I don't think I've ever heard Scott talk the way that he did last night. He was dejected. He almost sounded choked up, and just tired of this. I mean, he straight up said that he's tired of watching this, as we all are. So it's really frustrating. And again, considering just the mood overall following that loss, the JP news, Ty leaving, who's obviously a clubhouse favorite. Could that be the worst night in that clubhouse under Scott?
Could be. I mean, Scott's had to deal with some emotional clubhouses. Obviously, we know about the Paul Sewald trade and how that went over. The Kendall Graveman trade, we know how that went over in the clubhouse. So he's had to deal with some unrest, certainly, in his tenure. And for the most part, he typically handles that pretty well. And his teams do kind of, rebound after like emotional days like that pretty quickly after they happen. So, they traded Sewald and then they played their best baseball. And then they traded Graveman. They lost the next day. And then after that, they kicked it up and they were one of the best teams in baseball for the last, 6 weeks of that season. So, he does typically do a good job of getting these guys refocused. But yeah, last night there was just awful vibes. Again, you lose your captain, you lose your best player in the same 24-hour span. You lose kind of your, clubhouse, like golden retriever type of just around good dude in Ty France. And he's clearly there, but he's not really present, if you know what I mean. And so there's just kind of that cloud is just hanging over you. And then the offense gets off to a good start early. And you're thinking, okay, well, if they can get a big hit here and they could jump up 3 or 4 runs in the first, then maybe that'll settle everything down and they can. But no, not only did they only get the 1 run in that inning, they didn't really threaten to score for the other 8 in this game. So, just everything kind of came to a head last night. And again, it continues to baffle me with how badly this team has played over the last 30 or so games that they are still in first place. In any way you want to slice it, that is a fact. They are in first place. So, as bad as it is, and as frustrated as Scott clearly is, and as frustrated as we as fans clearly are, they got 60 games, and they don't have to make up any ground. They just have to start playing better. And so you hope that that's enough of a motivator to get these guys going in the right direction. But obviously you lose Julio. Then like 24 hours later, you lose JP. You lose France in that same time period. And obviously that's a big hit to clubhouse morale and stuff like that. And so somebody's got to step up. And I don't think this is one of those things where it can be Scott. I don't think Scott can be the leader in that clubhouse. One of the players or a couple of the players really have to step up and take on that mantle because, the leadership council or whatever you want to call it in that clubhouse right now, it's clearly failed and it's clearly taken a hit over the last few days. And so somebody has to step up. Somebody has to be that guy who just, I don't know how to describe it because you don't have to be the rah guy. You don't have to, slam people into lockers or anything like that. But somebody has to be that guy. They have to step up and be like, follow me, guys. I'm going to lead us out of this and we're going to do it together. Could be Mitch, but Mitch isn't playing well right now. So it's really tough to be that guy when you're not playing well.
Yeah. You hear that a lot when players talk about, clubhouse dynamics or locker room dynamics. And it's hard to really put any stock into a guy that's, trying to take the lead, but he's not performing. He's not leading by example. Right. So, and, not a lot of these guys are not performing right now. So it's hard for anyone to really kind of fill that mold. Right. So they're in a rough spot. I think the quote that stings the most is the one from Bryce Miller last night. He said, whatever happens at this point, whatever. I wish we could just go out and have fun, and no one is having fun right now. Like,
and it's really, really hard for that player, that leader in the clubhouse, to be a pitcher, which is pretty much the only position group that is performing. Because pitchers aren't out there every day. It kind of has to be a position player, and we know that JP certainly has those qualities, but now he's hurt. He's going to be away from the club for a little while, and he's not performing like at all, nowhere near what he needs to. So. it's just tough. And then to expect to go get that from outside the org and bring it in the next week, you don't know how that's going to play. Like, obviously the clubhouse needs some kind of spark, but we can't just sit here and be like, well, so-and-so's got a good reputation, so they should prioritize him. Like,
yeah, I think it would have to be someone that they already know, someone that's already been in the clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Gino Suarez, who's obviously hitting a lot better lately, but
sure,
I don't know. There's just there aren't really any obvious answers here right now, which makes us feel all the more hopeless at the moment. Like I said, it's the lowest point of the season so far, and it might be the lowest point for that clubhouse in Scott Service's time as Mariners manager. Because like you think about some other, pretty down moments. You mentioned, the Graveman trade and the Seawald trade, but there was also, the thing that happened with Kirby last year in Tampa. There was, obviously D Gordon and Gene Segura fighting behind closed doors. There's obviously been some pretty rough moments in the clubhouse, and more often than not, they have been able to right the ship. But this is going to be the ultimate test for Scott Service, who might be coaching for his job right now. And it seems like he might be very well aware of that, considering how he was talking last night. I mean, it kind of reminded me of how Pete Carroll sounded after the Ravens loss, that blowout loss, the 37-0 or whatever it was this past season. And, we heard after, Pete was fired, like that was kind of the turning point in deciding on what, the Seahawks wanted to do. And so it's hard not to kind of make those parallels or make those comparisons between the two situations. But sure. This is going to be a huge test for Scott and that clubhouse. And, this is the thing that we have said, like, this is what separates Scott. And this is why we like Scott as a manager, because even though that he has severe flaws in terms of his in-game management, he's been great at the clubhouse stuff. And so this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
If he's lost that clubhouse, he shouldn't be here. It's really that simple, because that is what he brings to the table is that. And if he can't bring that to the table, it's like Ty France, right? If Ty France can't hit, he brings nothing else to the table. There's nothing else that he's really good at. So if he can't do that, he needs to leave. And the same thing for Scott. If Scott can't, refocus this clubhouse and bring the energy back and empower these guys to make changes, then he's probably going to be gone, at the end of this year. And that'd be a really sad ending to what's been a really successful tenure as Mariners manager. But at some point, you have to do what you do best, and you have to be really good at it. And if you're not, then your flaws, like in-game management, feel for the game, those things are going to get amplified every single night, like they did last night.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to talk about what the Mariners could do now in light of the JP Crawford injury. We'll go over that in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by FanDuel.
I know I'm saying the obvious here, but I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, unfortunately, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKDON, and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Tonight, you can catch all the action between the Mariners and Angels on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. All you have to do to find that is search the word Mariners. So, again, JP Crawford had to leave last night's game after the bottom of the first inning. He was hit on his throwing hand by a pitch from Tyler Anderson, and that wound up fracturing his pinky. It's a hairline fracture on his pinky. So again, considering that it's his throwing hand, that's going to take a little while for him to recover. It doesn't seem like a season ending thing, but again, we're running out of time. We only have 60 games left here. So any sort of considerable, any sort of a, couple of weeks, 4 weeks, what have you, that's going to be a pretty good chunk of what we have left to go here. And obviously you don't know how he's going to look when he gets back. So this is a big blow for the Mariners, even though JP has had a really down year offensively. It's been a big regressive year for him offensively, but that's still the captain of your team. That's still your starting shortstop. And that's still a guy that, if he turns it around, right, that can have a significant positive impact on you as well. So again, I think, in the short term, they're probably going to call up Leo Rivas or Ryan Bliss today to take JP's spot. Dylan Moore, as he did yesterday after JP left the game, will play shortstop primarily, as he did when JP was hurt earlier this year and had to miss some time. And we'll see, at the very least, this happened a week before the deadline. So you still have avenues that you can go down here to figure out this shortstop dilemma that's suddenly presented itself to you. So how do you think the Mariners are going to approach this, Colby? Because we have seen them in the past, this front office, react to key players going down for a significant amount of time and make trades because of that. It happened with the Cano suspension back in 2018. They traded for Denard Span as kind of a reaction to that. And then they moved D. Gordon to second base, right? Then 2022, Ty France got hurt in Oakland, right? And then they traded for Carlos Santana a few days later. So again, trade market's starting to pick up. It seems Jeff Passam wrote an article today saying that teams are really starting to get deep into talks now with a week to go. And we know that the Mariners have been pretty active. So how do you think they're going to attack this thing, particularly shortstop?
Yeah, so in the short term, probably will be Rivas. He's really the only pure shortstop you have in the system. Bliss can do it, but there's obviously some, limitations with his arm that make him less than ideal. And Rivas is really hitting. Particularly in the last month or so, and at the very least, you're going to get pretty good defense from Rivas, and you're going to get quality at bats. I mean, you might not get a ton of production, but you're not going to get a ton of swing and miss. You're not going to get a ton of chase. He's going to swing at strikes. He's going to put the ball in play. He's going to move it forward, and that's honestly pretty helpful right now. So, the short term, I think that's the right answer is Rivas. In the long term or in until JP's back, there are a couple of options that came to mind immediately, and they're both kind of on like different ends of the spectrum, the offensive spectrum a little bit.
Sure.
On one hand, you have Ahmad Rosario, who has kind of been a utility guy for the Tampa Bay Rays this year. Lots of contact, he's hitting for a pretty high average, will not walk. It's the one thing these two guys have in common. They refuse to take walks. But he doesn't strike out. He's a better athlete. He puts the ball in play. So there's that Ahmad Rosario type. And then there's like a Paul DeYoung type. And DeYoung is a better defender than Rosario. It's not close. Like DeYoung's probably better than JP defensively. And he is going to hit for a lot of power. He's a big power threat, right-handed power bat. But he strikes out a ton. He also does not walk. So it's like, do you want defense and power from your shortstop for a couple weeks or until JP's ready? Then you want DeYoung. If you want some, a little bit more athleticism, a little bit more speed, although he's not a great base stealer, and you want more contact, and you just want guys who are going to go out there and hack, and they're going to swing, they're going to try and hit singles and doubles all day, then you probably prefer Rosario. So those are the two guys that jump out immediately. Both of them are performing enough right now that honestly, they might be upgrades over what JP's given you the last couple of weeks.
Rosario is.
Right.
For sure.
Rosario's been very good.
309, 332, 415. That's a 115 WRC plus.
Right.
71 games. So
both of these guys are rentals. So there's really no advantage one way or the other.
And also, I would add that both of these guys have been linked to the Mariners, or the Mariners have been linked to them in the past. DeYoung last summer. And I think the summer before that as well, there were some rumors about him when he was with the Cardinals. And then the Mariners were interested in Rosario to at least a certain degree this offseason as a free agent. So
right. So yeah, those are the two that spring to mind. A couple weeks ago we probably would have bumped up Bo Bichette a little bit, but he's also on the IL now, and he has not gotten really any better over the last month or so. So you're looking at DeYoung, you're looking at Rosario. Again, do you want power and defense, or do you want just like hit tool? If you want just hit tool, that's all you care about. Rosario's your guy. You want, 450 slug, a guy who can hit 10 bombs while he's here, and like above average shortstop defense, then you probably want DeYoung. So
yeah,
kind of pick your guy.
I'd prefer the guy that puts the ball in play.
Shortstop, I'd probably prefer the defense and the power. But I mean, let's be clear: the Mariners need more power, certainly. Yeah. They also need more contact. So both of these guys, I think they make a lot of sense. They're both rentals. They both should be available, especially DeYoung. And I do think that, in theory, one or two of those guys, I should say, either one of those guys could be traded like relatively quickly. Like you're not going to have long drawn out trade negotiations for either one of these guys, especially DeYoung. You probably put up a decent offer and you have him right now. So that would be my guess. Those are the two guys that sprung to mind immediately when, the first thought of JP Crawford hitting the IL came to mind.
And there's obviously bigger prizes on both of those teams. We've talked about a lot for the Mariners. So maybe maybe DeYoung's a part of a Luis Robert deal. Maybe Rosario is part of a Josh Lowe deal or a Brandon Lau deal or an Isak Paredes deal or what have you. Yep. So we'll see. All right. So we are going to go over some trade ideas revolving around Andres Munoz if the Mariners so decide to actually sell a little bit at the deadline,
which they're probably not going to.
They're not going to, but let's just do it anyway in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks and Tax Network USA. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And a general rule of thumb here, if they breathe air and they're scheduled to pitch against the Mariners, it's probably a good idea to pick more on their strikeouts. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Here on Locked On Mariners, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000. That's 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in this episode description.
And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Tonight, once again, you can catch all the action between the Mariners and the Angels on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. All you have to do to find that is search the word Mariners. All right, so we already hinted at it at the top of the show. Colby has some Andres Munoz trade ideas in the very instance the Mariners sell.
Ideas, kind of a strong. So basically, we talked about. Sure.
Yeah,
we talked about this yesterday, when it's like, hey, the Mariners keep losing. Do they actually sell? We had that question. And like Ty mentioned, and like I mentioned, and like pretty much anybody with a functioning brain on like baseball, the baseball side of things has mentioned, what do they have to sell? Like what are they going to sell? Because nobody on their offense is worth anything. Like obviously you're not trading Julio. None of those guys are worth anything. You're not trading any of your starting pitching. It's all club control through.
There's definitely someone in the comments that's like, yeah, you should trade Julio.
Sure. And that person's a moron. Goodbye. Yeah, don't care. You're a moron. So there's nobody on offense you can trade. There's nobody in the rotation that you're going to trade. Not in a selling move. What, you're going to sell Brian Wu for prospects? Like, what? You're not getting prospects for Brian Wu. Like, whatever. Like, that's not that. If you're trading from your rotation, that's a lateral move, like at best.
Yeah. Let's make it clear. You're not trading Kirby. You're not trading Gilbert this summer. Like you might trade one of those guys, maybe both of those guys at some point, but it's not going to happen this summer. It's not going to happen within the next week. And, you know, this sudden collapse the Mariners are kind of experiencing right now, which, by the way, they're still in first place despite all this. How long that, you know, is that sustainable? That's a whole nother question, whatever. But like, you know, this collapse that they're experiencing all of a sudden, that's not going to convince them, you know, on the drop of a hat here that, oh yeah, you know what? Let's trade Logan Gilbert. Let's trade George Kirby. Let's trade, you know, that's not going to happen.
Right. Because now you're doing more damage to 2025 than you're doing good to 2024. And this is not a rebuild type of thing. At best, this is a retool and you kind of go at it again. Maybe it's new leadership next year. It's going to be a lot of new players next year, but you're still entering 2025 with the goal of let's try and win the World Series. Well, at least you should be, John. So like these deals, and I only came up with two because again, like you're not going to get anything that's worth it to trade Josh Rojas right now. Like you're not going to get anything worth it to trade Dylan Moore right now. So what you're talking about, if you want to sell like what, Trent Thornton? What is he going to get you?
Yeah. I'll show you Marlowe? I'll refer to the 2019 deadline when they traded like Hunter Strickland and Roenis Elias. Like, okay, so you want Taylor Gilbo and Aaron Fletcher, like this year's equivalent of those guys?
Right. So anybody they have that they could sell this year and still seemingly compete this year and next year, like they're not going to trade those guys. The only two that maybe you might be able to like, hey, yeah, we traded these guys, but we got back pieces that help us this year and next year and the year after, is Gregory Santos, who's only pitched in like 3 games. So not a lot of, you know, tape or whatever you want to call it out there for that. And Andres Munoz, who you kind of need, especially because Brash isn't going to be back until the middle of next year. Yeah. So if you're lucky, he'll be back in the middle of next year. Yeah. And so you just kind of look at it and you go, okay, so if they do want to sell, Munoz is the guy they're selling. Like that's the only piece they have to sell. Who needs him? Well, every team in baseball would want Andres Munoz. Like,
right.
So good bullpen, bad bullpen, doesn't matter. Every team, but who can afford him? Like, what's even the comp for Munoz? And you start thinking about it, Munoz has what, 3.5, 4 years of club control left after this year. It's all cost controlled.
He has 4.5 years left right now.
Right.
So
it's all cost controlled. I think he's set to make like what, $12 million in that time span. Like,
and it's club options for the last 3 years. So it is one of the most, if not the most team-friendly deal in all of baseball right now. Mm-hmm. The most money he would make on one of those options is $10 million in 2028.
Yeah, so it is a high leverage arm who is
an all-star.
Yeah, all-star, high leverage arm who is young and has playoff experience. And you get him for 4 years at a cost certainty, 4.5 years.
Yeah.
How many teams can even afford that? Like who is that? Who is that comparison? It's Edwin Diaz. Right. Edwin Diaz is the comparison. And keep in mind that unlike the Diaz trade, you're not attaching Cano's contract to that trade.
Yeah.
Or to Munoz. You're not attaching. I mean, I guess you could attach like a Haniger contract if you want to try that, but right now you're not. You're not doing that.
Right.
So he's got to get you back at least what you got from Diaz. And Kelenic and Dunn were the two big pieces they got specifically for Diaz. And then there's obviously the Bruce and the Swarzak. That was more for the Cano portion of it. So you got like a top 10-ish prospect and you got like a top 100-ish prospect as the headliners for Diaz. And again, that was with Cano attached. So you start looking around and go, who are the teams that can even afford that?
Right. And also that was 6 years ago, and the trade market's changed. And now we're also talking about, you get this guy for a playoff run this year, and then potentially 4 more after this. So,
right. And so you start looking at it and you go, is there even any teams that can like make you an offer?
Because a team at that point, I think, is going to go, yeah, I'm just going to go trade whatever for a couple months of Paul Sewald.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Tanner Scott.
Scott for less. So yeah, this is really an exercise to be like, can I even find any trades that Seattle might be interested in that these other teams might be willing to do? And I only found a couple. And even then I'm like, I don't know if Seattle would do this. I don't know if they should.
Yeah. Let's get into them, because I can hear the comment section breathing down our neck and going like, you guys have talked for so long and you haven't even talked about the trades yet. Get to the trades. So what are the trades?
This is my show. So
that's right. That's right. You're
right. But no, so I have Munoz to Cleveland, to the Guardians. They have the best bullpen in baseball, but if they can pair Munoz with Clase at the back end, they could do some damage in the playoffs. And I have them acquiring Kyle Manzardo, made his major league debut.
Yep.
First baseman, left-handed hitter, went to WSU. Yep. Good profile fit for the ballpark. He's the headliner here. Angel Martinez, who is a really good athlete, and he's a nice prospect. He's played in the big leagues a little bit too. So you get a couple of guys with major league seasoning here, who are both major league ready, conceivably go into your starting lineup tomorrow in some degree. Scott Barlow, just kind of a veteran reliever that I guess replaced Munoz kind of, but not really. Obviously he's not as good, but you still, in theory, if you're making a trade like this, you want to compete a little bit this year, or at least try. And so Barlow kind of replaces what you're losing there. And then prospect Jonathan Rodriguez, who is a tooled up outfield prospect, who is in AAA, I believe, this year, and is performing quite well. So in theory, you could get 4 players on your major league roster, gain about 20 years of club control, and have your first baseman of the future, possibly a left fielder of the future, and like a really good high-end like utility type of guy in Martinez. So that's kind of the thought process there. And even then I'm sitting there like, would Cleveland do this? I don't know. And honestly, it feels a little light for Seattle.
Yeah.
Because like you're getting Manzardo, and I would say that Angel Martinez is kind of Justin Dunny, but I feel like they're a prospect short here in this deal. And I don't think that they're going to give you, like I don't think somebody like Daniel Espino does anything for the Mariners in this trade talk. So I don't know if Cleveland even has the pieces to get this done, but I do think Manzardo is a really good fit for the ballpark and what the Mariners need going forward. So and he has major league seasoning, which we know Jerry cares about.
Right. And then what's your other idea here?
Munoz to Baltimore for Colby Mayo and Connor Norby. Again, you get like a top 10, 15 prospect in Mayo, which is what Kelnick was. Yeah. You get like a fringe top 100 or top 50 to top 100, depending on who you ask, guy in Connor Norby. Norby is certainly ready to play in the big leagues. And honestly, Mayo probably is too. And now you have a second baseman and a third baseman for the rest of the year. Obviously, the Orioles are looking more at starting pitching. Like they would probably look at this and they'd be like, we're going to get that up.
I think they need it though. Cause like you look at their bullpen, the bullpen overall has been really good this year, but Kimbrel has been shaky in close game situations. Cano's regressed. They're not going to have Bautista back until sometime next year at the earliest. I think Munoz makes a lot of sense for the Orioles, but again, it's like, if you're the Orioles, why pay all this for Munoz right now when you can just, you're going to pay something that's still going to hurt, but nowhere close to that for Tanner Scott, for Paul Sewald.
Why don't you just go trade Norby for Tanner Scott, and then you can keep Mayo, or you can use Mayo to then go out and get Tariq Skubal, who they've been linked to.
Yeah.
So again, you kind of start looking at this and you go like, does it make sense for these teams to trade for Munoz? Maybe, but is it the best they can do with that package? Maybe it is, but it's probably not. So again, the whole thing, when you really start to look at it, just coming up with an Andres Munoz trade in a week with all those other factors, baked in, even for the teams that can afford it, it's very likely they just look at it and be like, we think we can get more with those pieces than just one guy. I did, I looked at the Dodgers as a possibility. Don't really feel like they have the prospect haul to get that done. They don't have the young major leaguers really to get that done either right now. Like, is Gavin Lux that valuable? No, he's not.
Andy Pages?
Probably not. Like James Outman, like what is like the third piece, the fourth piece, maybe. But you don't have the first or the second piece. And then I was thinking like, hey, Tampa really likes to get pitching back. Could you like do like Munoz for Paredes and like work a deal around those two guys being like the key pieces? Probably not, because they probably would want to trade for a starting pitcher if they're going to trade Paredes. So there's just not a lot of options out there that make a lot of sense for both Seattle and, the team that would be essentially paying Luis Robert prices for a guy who's going to pitch 20 innings for them this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it a little weird that they haven't announced roster moves yet? They put out the game. Mariners PR just put out the game notes.
I don't think so, because they don't have to put like a lineup out for another hour or so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, typically lineups come out 3 to 4 hours before the game.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably out there by the time you
right.
watching right now or watching this, or listening to this. But yeah, like right now it's 1:13 Pacific time that we're recording this, and they still haven't announced anything. Which again, like I feel like it's a slam dunk that it's going to be Locklear for France, and then Rivas or Bliss or Arias maybe for JP.
Right.
But yeah, we'll see.
But one other idea I did tinker around with, but I couldn't make it work. Arizona on Munoz.
Yeah.
You would have to get back like Jake McCarthy, and then it's like Jordan Lawler.
I'm sure trading another fan favorite reliever to Arizona would go over very well on the fan base.
Well, what if you get like Jake McCarthy, Paul Sewald, and Jordan Lawler?
You do know how much I love Jake McCarthy.
I know, but that's the other thing too. It's like, well, you're not getting Corbin Carroll, and you're not getting Ketel Marte. Although that would be fun. Like if you traded Munoz for Ketel Marte.
You're not.
You trade Munoz for Ketel Marte straight up. Would you do it, Ty?
Well, all right. The other, yes, but also the other thing.
But that's not a selling move.
Yeah. Well, but the other thing on that is like, could you use Andres Munoz in a package to get some, position player that you really want?
I think if Munoz were to be traded, and he's not going to be, it would be to a team like the Rays, and you would give up like Munoz and Evans and Pete and like Farmelo or something, and you would get like Paredes and Fairbanks or something like that. I think would be the only way. And again, that's not a selling move. It's not really a full buying move, because like to me, a full buying move is pretty much prospects for.
It's just
leader.
Prospects, yeah.
Right, but it's definitely not a move where you're kicking 2024 out the window. You're like, we can't compete this year. Just trade Munoz. No, you're still trying to compete in 2024. You're just doing it in a creative way, where you're trying to use one of your few major league strengths who has a ton of trade value to add to a position of need with a proven major leaguer. Yeah. So it's definitely not as sideways as like Seawall trade was last year, but it's not a pure buying move like the Luis Castillo thing. That's the only way I see Munoz getting traded, which is to say he's not getting traded.
Yeah, he's not getting traded. It's not happening. But, content, baby. That's going to do it for us.
You want to talk about last night's game for another 20 minutes?
I do not. So
you're welcome.
Yeah. There you go. That was our show for the day. Before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here. The Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Dane Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Dane Gonzalez, Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.